The following is an extract from an interview of Umberto Eco. The interviewer is Mukund Padmanabhan from The Hindu. So, Umberto Eco, a professor at the University of Bologna in Italy, had already acquired a formidable reputation as a scholar for his ideas on semiotics, the study of science, or you can talk about we have a um, symbols and signs which is known as a semiotics. Not only that, literary interpretation and the medieval aesthetics before he turned to writing fiction. And literary fiction, academic text, essay, children's books, newspaper articles. His written output is staggeringly large and wide ranging. In 1980, he acquired the equivalent of intellectual superstardom with the publication of The Name of the Rose. With the publication of what? The Name of the Rose, which sold more than 10 million copies. So, if you see that the story begins with what? The story begins with the interview, but before it gives the interview, it tries to present the introduction to the Umberto Eco, right? So, and the this particular part of an interview of the Italian novelist. So, who was he actually? Now, he was the Italian novelist, and his name was called as Umberto Eco. And what did he say actually? He said that he wrote novels on Sundays, right? So Mukund Padmanabhan from the Hindu newspaper interviewed him. So who was interviewing whom? Means we found out the person is called Umberto Eco, and he was interviewed by Mukund Padmanabhan from the Hindu newspaper. So interviewed him. Umberto Eco was a professor at the University of whom means in a University of Bologna, Italy at that time. He was famous for his thoughts on thoughts on semiotics, and you can say that interpretation of writings and the beauty of the Middle Ages. Later, he turned to write fiction. He wrote a variety of literature like fiction, academic text, essays, books for children, and uh, articles for newspapers. He uh, rose to fame in the year 1980 when his book titled, he rose to fame in the year means that called as a, he got famous in the year of 1980 when his book titled The Name of the Rose became a bestseller. Now, here, if you look into some of the words like formidable, the word formidable means something which is inspiring respect through being impressively large, powerful, intense, or capable, right? So, or you can say inspiring fear or respect um, to large, powerful, and make it capable, right? Then second one is called as medieval. So medieval means relating to the Middle Ages. Aesthetics, a branch of philosophy that deals with the nature and appreciation of beauty. That's what is known as aesthetics. Staggeringly, which means called as an astonishing or shocking degree. That is what called as a staggeringly. So what do you find out here? We just give the introduction of the Umberto Eco, and he was interviewed by another person from the Hindu newspaper whose name is called as Mukund Padmanabhan, right? And we also get the idea about Umberto Eco, who is Umberto Eco, who was nothing but an Italian novelist, right? Umberto Eco, and he was famous or means his book was bestseller, and for that he got into the famous in the year of 1980. So we were learning about him. So the dialogue started between the interviewer and interview. Umberto Eco with the Padmanabhan. So it was stated, Mukund, the English novelist and academic David Lodge once remarked, I can't understand how one man can do all the things. And Mukund Padmanabhan made this statement to reflect Umberto Eco, right? So Mukund, Mukund Padmanabhan, as an interviewer, begins by praising Umberto Eco and quoted the words which is spoken by David Lodge, in which he mentioned, who mentioned David Lodge, that it is out of he means one's capacity, and here one's capacity is referring to David Lodge's capacity to understand that how one person, and that one person is called as Umberto Eco, could be so good that as many things, also could as many things, right? So, in reply to this, Umberto Eco said, maybe I give the impression of doing many things, but in the end, I'm convinced I'm always doing the same thing. I'm convinced I'm doing the same thing means, now Umberto replied that by specifying that what, now whatever you said, it looked like means it looked like truth, right? Or it is truth. Maybe I give the impression of doing many things, right? So but at the same time he also said that means he did a multiple distinct task, but according to him, that what, he was always doing the same thing. Mukund again means put the question, which is, now Mukund's curiosity is identified here. They asked about the same thing that Eco found himself doing. So Umberto Eco, now that is more difficult to explain. I have some philosophical interest and I pursue them through my academic work. So who is saying? Umberto Eco stated that what? Now that is more difficult to explain, right? So when Mukund said that which is, so Umberto Eco said that it is very difficult. Now which is means what? Now which is the same thing, right? So Umberto Eco said that now that is more difficult to explain. I have some philosophical interest and I pursue them through my academic work and my novels. Even my books for children are about non-violence and peace. Uh, so you see the same bunch of ethical means called as a moral principle, philosophical interest, and then I have a secret. Did you know what will happen if you eliminate the empty spaces from the universe, right? Did you know what will happen if you eliminate the empty spaces from the universe? Eliminate the empty spaces in all the atoms. The universe will become as big as my fist. Similarly, we have a lot of empty space in our lives. I call them interesting, right? So, or called as, interstices, right? I call them interstices. Interstices means called as a space or gap. The meaning of means interstices is called as a call or a gap or called as a space. Say you are coming over to my place, right? So I call them interstices or I call them gap. So you say you are coming over to my place, you are an elevator, and while you are coming up, I'm waiting for you. This is an interstices. So waiting for you and you are coming, it's called as there is a gap, an empty space. I work in empty space, right? Or empty spaces while waiting for your elevator to come up from the first to the third floor, right? Is nothing but the gap or interstices or means uh, you can say that empty space. I have already written an article, labs. Now, if you observe here carefully, means the ideas which have been pointed here that called as Umberto Eco, who's pointed about means Mukund Padmanabhan's question, and Umberto Eco found it's a difficult to put it into words, right? So, but at the same time, means he started by saying that he had specific philosophical interest. So when we say that philosophy, that's something called as a devoted to the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. So that's what means he had specific interest that he continually wanted to pursue through his academic works and novels. Pursue through what? His academic works and novels. Talking about his books for children, talking about his books for children, they all talked about non-violence. They all talked about what? Non-violence and also peace, which were again based on ethics. Then he talked about his secret. He means referring to Umberto Eco. Then that he worked in empty spaces of time. Uh, he called them, it's nothing but a gap, according to him. These empty spaces were very crucial and vital, and if it is removed, the empty spaces from the atoms or from the universe, what would happen? The universe would be very compact. Compact means called as a decrease in size, just as big as its fist, just as big as its fist. So if the gap is taken out, so if he was expecting someone over, and he took the example of whom? He took the example of means a person who was coming in an elevator, and the author was waiting for him. So means the waiting is known as nothing but the gap, right? And it is known as the interstice, and he used that interstices to write an article. So he used that what? Interstice to write an article. And that is how he worked in such empty spaces of time, which many people waste by sitting idle and waiting. Right. So now after that, Mukund, again, uh, not everyone can do that, of course. Right. So Mukund is asking again to the um, Umberto Eco that what? Not everyone can do that, of course. Your non-fictional writing, your scholarly work has a certain playful and personal quality about it. It is a marked departure from a regular academic style. It is a marked departure from a regular academic style, which is invariably means always depersonalized. Invariably depersonalized. It means called as a uh, not stating about the personal. It is always something which is general and often dry and boring. Have you consciously adopted an informal approach, or is it something that just came natural to you? So, Mukund mentioned that what he did was undoubtedly unique, right? So, his scholarly articles were very different from the usual academic style. The usual academic style means that lacked with a personal touch and was dry and boring. On the other hand, Umberto's writings had a means particular playful and personal touch. He asked Eco, means Umberto Eco, that did he intentionally adopted an informal way of writing, or was he being natural? So Umberto Eco. So when I presented my first doctoral dissertation in Italy, so it is if you see that, how does it indicate here? Umberto Eco stated, when I presented my first doctoral dissertation in Italy, one of the professors said, scholars learn a lot of a certain subject, then they make a lot of false hypotheses. Scholars learn a lot of a certain subject, particular subject, then they make a what? A lot of false hypotheses. Then they correct them, and at the end, they put the conclusions. Right? You on the opposite side told the story of your research, even including your trials and errors. Trials and errors means something called as a you do not go for you do the research again and again. At the same time, he recognized I was right and went on to publish my dissertation as a book, which means he appreciated it. At that point, at the age of 22, I understood scholarly books should be written the way I had done. By telling the story of the research, this is why my essays always have a narrative aspects. So here, Umberto Eco, when who was saying that when he presented his first doctoral dissertation in Italy, so one of the professors said, what did he say? Means scholars learn a lot of a certain subject, then they make a lot of false hypotheses, then they correct them, and at the end they put the conclusions. You on the opposite told the story of your research, even including your trials and errors. At the same time, he recognized I was right and went on to publish my dissertation as a book, which meant he appreciated it. At that point, at the age of 22, I understood the scholarly book should be written the way I had done. By telling the story of the research, this is a story of the research. By telling the story of the research. And this is why my essays always have a narrative aspect. And this is why probably I started writing narratives so late, at the age of 50, more or less. I remember that my dear friend Roland Barthes was always frustrated that he was an essayist and not a novelist. He wanted to do creative writing one day or another, but he died before he could do so. I never felt this kind of a frustration. I started writing novels by accident. I had nothing to do one day, and so I started. Novels probably satisfied my taste for narration. So, if you see that Umberto Eco, so what does means or and how does he discuss about it? He started by stating that he narrated his story from his time in Italy, where a professor told that means Umberto Eco's thesis was different from others. So the professor told also that Umberto Eco's story, including the trials and errors, right, that happened during his research. Others, on the other hand, means that happened during his research means what? Now, means the professors, when the professor was involved himself in different types of research, at that time, means such kind of mistakes and means you can say that mistakes that are frequently happened, right? So, and it is also stated others on the other hand made false assumption. So he told his story including the trials and errors that happened during his research. Others on the other hand made false assumption. False assumption means what? There's something called as a false regions, and corrected them and put conclusions. This was the reason why the professor even published his thesis as a book. At the age of 22, he realized that his way of writing was the correct way, and that is why his essays were always in a narrative tone. Narrative means that called as a descriptive tone. Probably this was also the reason why he started writing novels at the age of 50. On the opposite of it, his friend Roland Barthes, who always wanted to be a novelist along with an essayist. Unfortunately, what happened to him, what happened to the Roland, but he died before he could do so. While for Eco or Umberto Eco, it happened by accident, but novel writing satisfied his hunger for narration. Now, if you see that, Mukund again put another question talking about nobles. From being a famous uh, academic, you went on to becoming spectacularly famous after the publication of the name of the Roj. You have written 5 novels against many more scholarly works of non-fiction, at least more than 20 of them. So when Mukund was saying this, so pointing out Umberto Eco's novels, Mukund stated or mentioned that he became astoundingly famous. Astoundingly means called as someone who is famous, means uh, abruptly, or called as uh, uh, extraordinarily after the publication of the book name called as the name of the road. From a famous academic, he went on to become a famous novelist, though means he had written many more scholarly works than novels. So, how many scholarly works he had written? That's something called as a 20. Then novels is called as a 5, right? So, Umberto Eco again stated that, or Umberto Eco made it correct or said that no, over 40, right? So, Umberto Eco corrected that he had written over 40 non-fiction pieces. Mukund said over 40? Among them a seminal piece of work on semiotics. But ask most people about Umberto Eco, and they will say, oh, he is the novelist. Does that bother you? Right. Now, do you see that the kind of idea we draw here? Mukund, who was saying that, means you have written 40 non-fiction, right? Among them, a seminal piece of work on semiotics. Seminal means called as a some means fictions are non-fictions are called as influential, influential piece of work on semiotics. But ask most people about Umberto Eco, and they will say that he is the novelist, right? And does that bother you? Means like you write non-fiction, you also write novels, right? So in that case, means what Mukund wanted to say that means when he was good at uh, writing non-fiction, but people call him means a novelist. So is it creating the kind of a problem to him, right? So as we know that semiotics is called as a study of sign. So Umberto Eco said yes, because I consider myself a university professor who writes novels on Sandage. It is not a joke. I participate in academic conference and not meetings of pen clubs, right, and writers. I identify myself with the academic community. But okay, if they means referring to the most people have read only the novels. Uh, so laughs and shrugs means the kind of a reaction he showed, that called as it's okay, means if most of the people have read only the novels. So I know that by writing novels, I reach a larger audience. I cannot expect to have 1 million reader with stuff on semiotics. Semiotics means the study of science, right? So now, if you look into this one, it is stated Umberto Eco replied to Mukund by accepting that yes, it did bother to him being identified as a novelist. Umberto, on the other hand, wanted to point out that he wanted to identify himself with the academic community because he considered himself a professor who wrote novels only on Sundays. He also attended academic conference as opposed to pen clubs, and means he did not like that pen clubs and writers meeting. Uh, but on the other hand, Umberto Eco accepted that he was well aware that by writing novels, right? He was well aware that by writing novels, he was reaching a wider audience, because 1 million people would not obviously be interested in what? Now, only about the semiotics. People also interested to read means novels, not about that semiotics or study of science. So, Mukund, this brings me to my next question. So, again, who? Mukund Padmanabhan asked the question to whom? That is called as Umberto Eco. That brings me to my next question. The Name of the Roach is a very serious novel. It is a detective yarn at one level, but it also delves into metaphysics, theology, and medieval history. But it enjoyed a huge mass audience. Were you puzzled at all by this? So Mukund changed the topic here and mentioned that the name of the Roach, that was called as one of the writing of Umberto Eco, and one of the noble, or one of the nobles. So Mukund stated that it was a very serious novel, and still it managed to attract a large audience. So though your means you have written novels, but your novel is also very interesting one, but it means difficult to manage or to attract a large audience. It dealt with what? Detective stuff. Which one? Means that called as The Name of the Roach dealt with the detective stuff, and also metaphysics called as a spiritual one, theology on the basis of the God, and the medieval history, it's called as a Middle Ages history. So Mukund also asked Umberto, right, if he was at all surprised by his success. So means Umberto Eco stated that no. Umberto replied that he was not at all surprised. The only people who were surprised were journalists and publishers, right? So, and sometimes publisher, and this is because journalists and publisher believe that people like trash and don't like difficult reading experiences. People like trash. People are compared with the trash means something which is wastage, right? And don't like difficult reading experiences. So yes, what happened? So, so that is what it is stated. People replied that, Umberto replied that he was not at all surprised, because according to him, means so only people who were surprised was the journalist and publisher, right? So believe that people like trust and don't like difficult reading experiences. Consider there are 6 billion people on this planet. The Name of the Roach sold between 10 and 15 million copies. So in a way, I reached only a small percentage of readers. But it is exactly these kinds of readers who don't want easy experiences, or at least don't always want this. I myself at 9 p.m. After dinner was television and want to see either Miami Vice or Emergency Room. I enjoy it and I need it, but not all day. So Umberto Eco's replied on a kind of a thing and stated that people are different from one another, right? So, and Umberto Eco stated that what means how journalists and publishers were different from common, right? They might be felt the kind of a surprising, because they believe that people like means people like the easy reading experiences, right? And people are nothing but the trash, people like the easy reading means experiences, and those easy reading experiences are trash. Trash means called as a wastage, while the truth was truth was through his novel. He reached that small percentage of the population who liked the challenging reading experiences. He understood this because of himself, desired to watch. So he gave his example that how does he means spend his time to watch Miami Vice or Emergency Room, means after dinner, but not all day too long. So Mukund, just a minute, I have only 2% of. Are you there? Aditi, are you there?
Yes, sir.
So, do you get the point? Understand? Or do you find any difficulty? Please to tell me.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. So,
Understood.
okay. So, Miami Vice or emergency room after dinner, but not all day too long. You could find out that Mukund here said that. Could the huge success of the Nobel have anything to do with the fact that it dealt with a period of medieval history? That so means who Mukund asked to Umberto again about the possibility of success of the Nobel having to do something. It's association with the Middle Age, medieval history or Middle Age. So Umberto Eco said that is possible. But let me tell you another story, because I often tell stories like a Chinese wise man, right? So Umberto Eco did not negate the possibility as he began to tell a story. What did he say? My American publisher, right, said while she loved my book, she did not expect to sell more than 3,000 copies in her country. She did not expect to sell more than 3,000 copies in a country where nobody had seen a cathedral or studies Latin. So I was given an advance for 3,000 copies. But in the end, it is sold 2 or 3 million in the USA, right? USA or US. A lot of books have been written about the medieval past far before mine, right? So I think the success of the book is a mystery. Success of the book is what? A mystery. Nobody can predict. If I think if I had written the name of the rose 10 years earlier or 10 years later, it would not have been the same. Why it worked at that time is a mystery. So if you look into that, Umberto thought that what he was behaving like a Chinese wise man, Chinese wise old man. So Umberto Eco mentioned that his American publisher, who was expecting like 3,000 copies, would be sold in a country like US. So, in the country like US, where no one had ever seen a cathedral. The meaning of cathedral is called as a church, or studied Latin language. But to their surprise, means the publisher as well as the author, right? To their surprise, they ended up selling around 2 or 3 million copies. So Umberto considered that what the success of his book is nothing but a mystery. If it had been written 10 years earlier or 10 years later, then what would happen? So the situation would have been different. Means and at that point of time it would not sell something like a 3 million copies, so it would be means less than that. That is what. So with this note, means the kind of interview means completed. So if you see that Umberto Eco and Mukund conversation, it's something like a what, a kind of an example of what, example of interviewers or interviewer and interviewee, and the kind of a discussion means had made between them is nothing but means indicating the writer's personal life, and means had some criticism or called as uh, some of the kind of a question, right, which is trying to know about the intention of the writer's writing, and to know something related to the personal and the professional part of the personal and professional part of the author or the writer, or here you can say that interview. So here the main character you could find out is Umberto Eco, who is a university professor and who attends academic conference, and he finds so much time to write in the empty space. Like we had a discussion in which sorry, he had a discussion. While discussion he mentioned that, uh, and he pointed that means just like structure of atoms and just like structure of universe, right, he terms these he terms these empty spaces as interstices. What do you mean by interstices? The meaning of interstices is known as gap, right, or space. So he's pointed that if he is waiting for someone coming to his house via escalator, or called a, no, not escalator, elevator, he would use that time to write an essay rather than sit idle. Means he did not want to waste the time. Therefore, he considered himself a scholar who writes novels on Sunday, right? So if you see also means uh, the distinctive about Eco's academic writing style. So it completely false hypothesis. False hypothesis means called as a wrong belief, right? So which is a rectify and give conclusion, right? So the distinctive about Umberto Eco's academic writing style. So, why do I state that? Because we find out couple of things in this particular second part that give the second part more important. It's called as we are talking about Umberto Eco, and we discuss about means who is Umberto Eco and what does he try to mention. Second is called as how his writing is means so unique, and what did he say about academic writing style. So he stated that academic scholars write false hypotheses, right, and rectify them and give conclusions. On the other hand, Umberto takes the readers through the journey of his research, so and pointing all the trials and errors to reach the conclusion. So it means his total point is nothing but people do mistakes, people learn from that mistakes, and that learning they put it as the conclusion, right? So, but at the same time, Umberto Eco is different from them. What Umberto Eco does, now he takes the readers through the journey of his research. So readers through the journey of his research means what? Now while he was doing the research, so he makes a plan, right? And he quoted all the mistakes and means, situations that reached to the conclusion. He pointed all the mistakes to reach the conclusion. His narrative style of writing so made him nothing but the unique. Now, things that the other people do and make mistake and correct it and conclude, give a conclusion, but the author does nothing but he made the mistake right? But he quoted those of the mistakes and coming with the conclusion and write those of the process of his research, right? So even if you look into that, Umberto Eco identifies himself with the academic community, right? So according to him, what he is a university professor, right? So who attends academic conference all week and writes novels on Sunday, right? So and there is a one of the book which he wrote, and he pointed that that book was a huge success, right? What was his book? His book name is called as The Name of the Roach, right? So and the reason behind of its success is nothing but means it is differentiating from other novels. It is a detective narrative that contains spiritual, religious, and m- uh, mid middle middle age history. Therefore, it targeted the means audience that is it targeted the audience that is not interested in an means easy reading experience and possibly not all the time. However, the success of the novel still remains a mystery. According to Umberto Eco, that it had the Nobel or it had the novel been written 10 years earlier or later, it would have not attracted the same amount of or same number of the audience that it showed up today, right? So all total, it was a kind of a experience uh, that Umberto Eco presented before the Mukund, right? Who is Mukund? Now you can point out Mukund was the one of the um journalist from the Hindu, isn't it? So that's how the writer means, made the conversation and stated about in the second part.